Right, now the main pieces of equipment that are needed are a cell board, which is this board here, comes with a non-slip mat, has a groove side and it has a flat side, a rolling pin, 9-inch rolling pin, ball tool or a dog bone tool. There are a few different ones on the market. These are two different makes of dog bone tools. I've found a lot of students work better with the ball tool. It's a bit easier, so this is what I would recommend. If you go to see my friend Tracy at Cakes to Please in Shipley, she sells these, so you'll be able to get them from there, and any other things that you need that you can't get from me. Other tools that we'll be using on the filler flowers, I'm going to use this tool. This is called a veining tool, a silk veining tool. We use this to put veins into flowers where we don't have the rubber veins or anything like that. If you don't want to spend the money, they're only £2 odd for these, so they're not an expensive item. You will need a pair of long nose pliers, or a pair of decent scissors to cut your wires. I use florist scissors, but don't use ordinary scissors, but for today I'm going to use these, but I also use them for bending wires as well. Then the cutters that we're going to use to make the roses are these two cutters here. Those are rose petal cutters. I prefer the metal ones because they're a lot sharper and they don't go blunt like some of the plastic ones. And also as well, I've got some metal rose leaf cutters here. You can buy plastic ones. These are more expensive, but again the metal ones are sharper. And then also dusting brushes for dusting your colour onto your flowers and leaves. And glue. I sell this in a little bottle. It comes with a brush in it. It's £2 for the brush and bottle, and then 50p for a refill when you've used your glue up in it. Right, I'm going to get on now. So I'm going to use flower paste to do our flowers with, which is a paste that's got gums in it that enables it to be very stretchy, so you can roll it very thin. And the roses that I'm doing are, if I just get a sample down to show you, I'm doing cream roses, and these I've dusted with a pinky coloured edge. So if we put that up close up so you can see that, okay. Right, so this is the flower paste. I've already coloured it in some ivory, Wilton do an ivory, and so do Sugar Flare colours. Other than that, I would use a very light brown, probably a teddy bear brown or something from Squire's Kitchen, but Sugar Flare is cheaper and I find the colours are just as good. So I'm going to start off by rolling out a small amount, I'm going to roll out a small amount, and I'm going to show you how to make the centre of the rose. Now this you need to dry, ready for using, so I'm using a small ball of paste. Now if you have difficulty measuring things, there is another tool that you can get, which is this tool here, which is called a size guide. And for this I'm going to use a size 6 ball of paste, which your ball of paste should just fit in. It's just slightly dropped through there, but that would be about the right size. You've got to remember that that is going to fit into the smaller one of the two cutters, so it doesn't want to be bigger than that. Smaller than that is better than bigger. There's a friend of mine that did cakes for me years ago. She said my roses look like cabbages, and that is the reason why is because she made the centres too big. Right, so I've already cut some wires somewhere. Well, put them, here we are. This is a 20 gauge wire. We start off with a full size wire. This is a 20 gauge, which is a very large wire. So what we do is we cut that into 3. So you get 3 roses out of 1 wire. Sorry, just knocked my camera. And what you do then, first of all, is you put a hook on the end of the wire, like that. It's what we call a shepherd's crook. Then pop that into the ball of paste, like that. And then between 2 fingers at the top, where you've put the wire in, roll it between your fingers like that. When you've done that, you can go on to just one hand and just roll it so you've got a bit of a point on the top, like that. So you've got your cone there, okay? So that needs to be put on one side to dry. I've already got one here that I've already dried, so that's hard, okay? So if I go back to my paste, now remember, when you're making roses, unless you're doing a dark coloured rose like a red or a burgundy or something like that, we always start off with a slightly deeper colour than the flower that you want to finish with, and then you add white to each layer that you've got, which mimics the illusion of the light shining through the petals as the flower opens. So first of all, you need a tiny bit of white fat on your board. We use Trex, which is a vegetable fat, because we need the paste to stick to the board, and we also need to be able to roll it out very thin. And if we try to do that without putting the Trex on there, because once it goes on the board, it stays on the board, you don't move it around, it's not pastry, and roll it out nice and thin. According to Maureen, who taught me when I first started, you should be able to read a newspaper through your paste, which is how thin you should get it. Now, you can't do this with sugar paste that you cover your cakes with, or fondant as you'll find it's called in supermarkets, which is actually wrong. It should be sugar paste, but there we are. So you need it really thin, and if I don't know whether you can see or not from there, but I can just see the mottled background of the board coming through there. So I'm going to start off by cutting out 2 petals. Take that paste away. Make sure that you keep it covered at all times, because if you don't, it will dry out. Then I have a little palette knife. You can get these from an art place. I usually go to the range because they're pretty good on price with things like this. You can buy sets for about £2 or £3 from there. I haven't seen them recently, so I don't know how much they are now, but I think they were about £2.99 when I bought my set, which is about 2 or 3 years ago. Right, the next job we're going to do is to thin the edges. So you get it onto the onto this pad here, which is called petal pad. This one is a PME one, which is very easy to wash. You can put it in your washer with your whites, and when it gets dirty, and wash it, and it'll be fine. Some of the pads that are on the market you can't wash. Start from the edge with your ball tool on the edge, half on and half off, and pull it round the side like that, and thin the edges. Don't be frightened of putting some pressure on it. Round from the top to the bottom, top to bottom. And then I turn it over. The reason I turn it over is because the way that I've frilled the petals there, they're going to go the way that I want them to go. So the next job now is to first petal, glue all over. That one is going to totally cover the centre that I made previously. So down onto your petal like that, and then pull the top part round and bring it right round as far as you can get it, tuck it in like that, and then take the other side all the way around the other way. When you look down the centre there, you shouldn't be able to see that centre in there. That should be totally covered. Okay, then what you do then is turn it over. Where your edge of your petal is there, you're going to put that face down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue 2/3 of the petal, or 3/4, it doesn't matter. Don't go too far up, you don't want to go right up to the top. From here on in, you don't want any glue on the top part there, otherwise when you come to dusting your flowers, they just won't take. So just bring it round to meet, like that, and like that. Okay? So we just put that to one side and let that dry. Right, get rid of that. Go back to the paste. Now then, this is where your paste is going to grow, so you need to be careful here. So if you're only making a few, don't colour too much paste. I'm going to end up with a lot of paste left here. And what we do now at this stage is, between each layer of petals, we're going to add the same amount of white to that paste. And you need to keep kneading it in until you've got it all the way through. You don't want any streaky paste. Unless you were doing a rose that's streaky, of course, then that's a different matter. But we're not. We're doing a plain coloured rose. I wouldn't recommend trying anything complicated like that. You'd probably get yourself a bit frustrated and you'd end up with loads of odd pieces of paste, but we don't waste any of that. Right, so once we've done that, onto the board again. I'm just going to run my fingers over because there is still some white fat on there. We don't want too much on, otherwise you'll find it'll stick to your pad when you come to thin your edges. Roll your paste out again. Now usually when we do a spray of roses in class, I don't have people doing too many. You can do as many as you want if you feel you want to, but all I ask is that you do one of each stage. So you'll want one at the bud stage, so one of your roses you will leave at that stage with just the 2 petals on, and then do one to the half rose stage. Now that can be left at 2 different stages, which I'll explain as we go along. One can be left at the next stage that we can just make sure I get my right one that I've already dried earlier. I've done my blue peach bit. Right, get your cutter again. We're using the same size cutter. This time I'm going to cut out 3 petals. Excuse my cough, I've had a chest infection ever since before lockdown started, and unfortunately I'm one of the many that have got the dreaded NHS letter to tell us to shield, so I'm not allowed out, so I just have to stay at home and do things like this. Right, so again, like before, thin the edges top to bottom like that. Don't try and go around your petals like that. I find a lot of students, when they do that, they tend to drift in and you end up with a ridge around the edge of your petal and the edge is thick. So do it that way from top to bottom. Don't worry about it going out of shape like that. We can soon reshape that again. That's it. Top down, top down. Turn them over again. The thing is, when you turn them over, and the reason why I do this is because that's the side that's got the greasy bit on it, so that's going to be on the inside, and that way you won't have any problem when you come to dusting. So glue, I'm only going to glue half the petal this time. I'm not going to glue any more than half the petal on any of the next few layers that we do. I think that needs a bit more glue. The thing is, it's better to put less glue on than it is too much glue, because you can always add a bit of glue afterwards if you feel that it's not sticking properly, but you can't take it off if you've got too much on. Right, so next layer, you want to be very, very slightly higher than the last layer. So you want probably about a couple of centimetres higher than the next layer. And the reason for that is when you do your flower, if you put them all at the same level, by the time you finish you end up with the centre higher than the outer petals, and what we want is a flat flower. Because we're going higher, you'll find that when we've curled the petals back, which you will see in a bit, the petals will be level. So your next petal goes halfway across that, like that. We're aiming to get sort of like an Isle of Man type thing. So if I do it this way and just tuck that round, leave that first one open, the next one goes in halfway across that, just pull that petal back, tuck that one in like that, and then you can then go around and adjust your petals in to make sure it's all neat at the bottom. Just going to slide those down a bit. I've slid up. The advantage with the glue on, you can, if they're in the wrong position, you can slide them down into the right position. So once you've done that, then with your finger and your thumb, just curve your petals back like this. Okay. I'll just turn that up a little bit because you can't see everything that I do. Right, so I'm just going to put that one to one side to dry. Back to the paste. I've gone for a smaller. Hang on a minute. No, I haven't. That one. That's the one. I've got loads of different colours in here. That's why I'm faffing about with it a bit there. So I'm only going to take half of this now because I don't need all that, because it's going to grow again because I'm going to add more white to it. And since I'm only doing a couple of flowers here, we don't need any more than that. Just give a wipe over with the board. If you feel you need a little bit more white fat on, just put a little tiny bit on. You don't need a lot. Roll that out. And cut out another 3 petals. 3. Take away your excess. And then these petals go onto your pad again. And thin the edges. Again in the same way from the top down. See, it's stuck a little bit there because I'd put a bit more white fat on my board, so they're a little bit stickier on the back than the last lot. Turn them over. Halfway down with the glue, from the middle down. Not going to touch that top bit at all. Keep the top on your bottle as well. We all have a habit of knocking these bottles over and spilling the glue, so people go through a lot more glue than they need to. Right, so back to the rose, and this time I'm going to turn the rose upside down to put these petals on, for the simple reason that, number one, I want the point of each of these petals to go in between the previous layer, and the other reason is these are going to be a bit more open, so they tend to be a bit looser and they can fall back and not go where you want them to do. So bring it down sort of lower than the 2 points on the petals on either side of it. So if you look at it, then you should have that little bit extra above, and that puts that petal over the join of the previous layer. Have a look at your rose to see which way it goes round, so it overlaps on that side So I'm going to go that way around now, because you're going the opposite way around to the first layer that you put on, and that depends on whether you're right-handed or left-handed. There isn't a right or wrong way of doing this, it's whichever is easier for you. I'm not going to stick the petals down yet because I just want to place them. They may overlap, they may not. It just depends, because you're going to be more open with this layer. And then you can go around, then that goes under, so that overlaps there, that goes down there, that only meets that one, that one's going under and that's going over. So they have overlapped on a couple of the petals, but it doesn't matter if they don't. Turn it up the other way, and then you want more of a curve back on your petals this time, so it's more open, like that. So what I need to do now is, I've got a piece of dry foam here, florist foam, and we use this to stick the flowers in so that we can keep them in shape. So what I'm going to do to make sure they don't drop back like that one's doing there, I'm going to turn them upside down, just go around and give your petals a little bit of a tweak, like that, bend the wire over, and then that can go into the foam. Now I've already got some roses here that are already dry that I did this morning, that are ready for the next layer. Now this one is good. This is a half rose. Now if you're doing a half rose, you can either stop at the layer before with just 2 petals and then 3, or you can do 3 and 3 depending on how you want them. You can mix them up if you want, as I've done with some of the roses that I'm going to put in the spray that I'm going to show you. So I've got different colours, got a bit of dried foam on there off my foam, so I'm just going to pop that to one side now because that's dry. So what I'm going to do is, I'm now going to make that into a full rose. So back to the paste, add the same amount of paste again and mix those together. So this is going to make the outer petals. And if you look at roses either in a shop or in your garden if you have them, you can see what I mean about the centre of the rose looking deeper, because the petals in the centre are more tightly woven, so they don't let the light through, so they appear darker. They're not really, but we're creating an illusion the way we do these roses. It's one of the only roses that we do like this, really. You know, I mean, even when we do things like peonies and that have a lot of petals, we don't do that as much, because generally we do when they're fairly open, so that the light is shining through all the petals anyway, so you get the illusion of the paler colour. But if you watch them when they're opening, you will see that before they open they are a lot darker. Right, so roll your paste out again as thin as you can. As you notice, I'm not picking up and moving round at all. It's not a piece of pastry. Once you get it on the board, it stays on the board until you've got it as thin as you want to. As long as you've got some white fat on there, it's not gonna, you're going to find that it's easy to roll out. You're not going to get creases in it or anything like that. I'm not saying that we don't every now and again, but that's just purely by chance. Now this time I'm going on to the larger cutter now. This is the larger one to that. So this is for the outer row of petals. So I'm going to cut out 5 petals. Pop that back into my bag. Don't need that now. Get your petals onto your pad. Round the edge. Now if we're doing life-size roses, because these cutters come in lots of different sizes up to a full life-size flower, with life-size ones we do tend to vein them and things like that because it's more obvious on the larger roses. This size of rose we don't put any veining on because nobody's going to see it anyway. And when people look at what you've done with a spray of flowers on a cake, it's the overall effect that people are looking at. Unless they're a florist or somebody that does sugarcraft, they probably won't look close enough to pick up on any details. And as I tell all my students, if anybody criticises anything that you've done, just say, well, you do it. That's the answer to that. Right, again, I'm going to glue half the petal. They're going to get caught out if you tell them to do it themselves, because if they don't know how to do it, they wouldn't know where to start, would they? This is the whole point, and this is why particularly wedding cakes are so expensive, because of the amount of work and time that goes into doing all these things. The flowers actually, to do a full spray, take longer than doing the cake, depending on what sort of design you're doing on it, which you will see in a bit, because I'm going to put this spray of flowers on a wedding cake that I've been working on. So that will give you an idea of what they look like and how to position them as well. Right, now then, back to the dried one. Again, I'm going to turn it upside down, and again you want your petals to be very slightly higher than the previous layer, and all I'm going to do now is, it doesn't matter where you start, I'm just going to place the petals side by side. Now then, which way are we overlapping? We're overlapping on that side, so I can press that down. The only one that you need to leave open is the first one that you put on, because the last one is going to go underneath that one. All I'm doing at the moment is just placing them at the top, same as I did with the previous layer. Then your last one goes under the first petal and over the petal before it, and then bring that one down and over it. Then you can go around, and you can very gently go around and stick your petals down like that. So then you've got your to that layer. Got a couple of hairs on there from somewhere. It's my cat. Right, so then you can curve these petals back. Now if you're doing a life-size one, I would do another layer after this, and they would be separately wired. Because you're doing a larger one, you can get more carried away, more petals on it. But it depends what it's for. If you're doing a cake and you just wanted to put one flower on it, then that would be ideal. You'd only have one flower to do. So again, I'm going to put it upside down, so I'm just going to go around and tweak those petals. While it's drying, what you need to do is to keep coming back and having a look and see if the petals have dropped down. If they've dropped down, you can reposition them while it's still movable. Okay, so there we are. That's where we've got to with that. So again, bend the wire down and onto the pad. I'm just going to move that a bit further forward. You can see more of what I'm doing there. Right, now we've done those, so I'm going to show you another flower before I get on to finishing those, because they're going to have a calyx put on the back, and also I'm going to show you how to make the leaves. But before that, I'm going to show you how to make a filler flower. Now filler flowers, we use a thinner wire for that, and I would recommend using a 26 gauge wire for this. Where are we? 26. There. Now because I'm going to put some stamens in the centre, I'm going to use a green wire, but you're going to cover the wire anyway, so it doesn't really matter. You can use either green or white wire with this. But this time I'm going to cut the wires into 4. We never waste anything, because